Welcome everyone to the third Thursday meetup of the West Orlando WordPress Meetup Group. I'm Rob Watson, a co-organizer and host, and West Orlando WordPress is an official WordPress meetup group and is affiliated with the main WordPress Orlando and WordCamp US meetup groups. Designers and non-designers alike can get caught up in the aesthetics and functionality of a website and forget that every decision made should be supported by an underlying strategy. In tonight's presentation, we will discuss how to find your site's primary call to action and create experiences that support that goal. We will also evaluate design choices of many well-known sites as we examine how they help or hinder common goals. Whether you're a designer, developer, or a person maintaining a site, you will come away with a critical eye for evaluating design patterns and a process for narrowing down a design strategy. Tonight's presenter is Michelle Schulp. Michelle is an independent graphic designer and front-end developer in Minneapolis. Before beginning her career, she studied visual communications, psychology, and sociology. As her work progressed, she also branched into front-end development and user experience design. This combination of disciplines led her to adopt a strategy-based approach to design, focused on solving tangible problems and achieving real goals based on how people think. Now she collaborates on projects with clients ranging from solopreneurs to enterprise. She loves the open source community, and when she is not working on projects, she speaks, volunteers, and organizes for events and organizations around the country. Her passions are communication and empowerment, and she believes in the power of why. At this point, I'd like to invite everyone to mute their microphones for the presentation. Michelle, thank you for being our presenter this evening. The time is now yours.
Oh, thanks. Oh, it's so formal. I like the introduction. You've done this a couple times. All right, I will share my screen so that you all can see what I am going to be sharing with you. I do have some slides. I will likely not be able to see the chat while I'm talking, but I welcome everyone to chime in with their questions because we should have time at the end to answer them after the recording is over. So all your top secret questions, put them all together because no one else will know. It'll be fun. And that's the benefit of actually showing up to the meetup instead of just watching it later. You get to have a little bit of conversation, so that's great. Anyway, welcome to the presentation. Thank you for the great introduction. So, my name is Michelle. Hi, I design and build websites, usually in WordPress. That's kind of where my specialty lies. My background is in design, but I spend probably 60% of my time in a code editor now and 40% of my time in a design program. But design is the background I come from, and as such, I have a pretty strong view on strategy. And so I wanted to talk to you all about that because I think that's the part that is missing when we start talking too much about technical stuff. Before we talk about strategy, though, I want to talk a little bit about how do people use the web, right? That's kind of a fundamental question because we need to know how people actually use the thing that we are designing for. So do people use the web like a pamphlet? Do they read it very carefully or scan it, consider all of the information? Is that how people use the web? It's actually not true. People actually use the web more like a billboard. So if you've ever been driving down the highway and you see a billboard, you kind of take a passing glance at it. Maybe you kind of see the first random thing that comes to mind, but you're trying to pay attention to what you're doing. You have an end goal in mind, and so you're not going to carefully read all of the stuff on every single billboard because you're not really paying attention. And that's actually the way that most people are reading web content. And now the other thing is, how are people thinking about it? How are people making decisions? Are they using logical evaluation? Do they make decisions finding the best available solution from a carefully considered set of options? Not really. They're using triage, right? We're trying to figure out the first available thing that meets their basic requirements, and then we're going to move to another if that one doesn't work. There's a great word called satisficing, which is basically describing this process. We're basically, we're driving past these billboards, and the first one that seems right, cool, let's do that one. That might work. And if it doesn't work, all right, we'll try the next one. On top of that, there's this concept called the 8-second rule. They have done research, and the link is here, that people have less than the 8-second attention span of a goldfish. So actually, people are paying less attention to your site than a goldfish would if a goldfish would browse the web. So we have all these things going for us, right? We have people that are just kind of flying by, trying to figure out whatever the first available thing is. And if you don't get their attention within 8 seconds, well, you know, you probably don't have their attention. So that seems kind of problematic. So I guess if we know how people visit websites, the next question is, why do people visit websites, right? And usually when I'm in person, I will ask people to volunteer some different information. You know, why do they think people visit websites? But usually most of the things people say, stuff like, oh, you know, to find out information or to buy something or to learn something, right? All of these things have something in common. People are visiting websites to do something. They want to take some kind of action. And conveniently, we have a word in the English language for that, and that's called a verb. So you didn't know that you had to do grammar, but here we are. A verb is a word that represents an action or a state of being, and that is the reason that people are visiting your website, is to do a bunch of verbs. And you might recognize some of these verbs, right? Buy, join, download, subscribe, comment, share, like. These are all verbs that people can do on a website, and one of these is probably the reason that they are visiting websites in general. The next question is, if we know why people visit websites, right? If they want to take some kind of action, if they want to do something, now you have to ask yourself, why are they visiting your website specifically? Why are they here? It's important to note, unless they're your mom, and we love our moms, but they probably don't care specifically about you or your company. They don't necessarily want to try to figure out like how to navigate or find things, like how to use your site. They're not there because, you know, they love being on your site. They're there because they want to figure out what problems you can solve for them and how to access your solution. So they're trying to do the thing, right? That's why they're there. So if they're there to try to do that, then the first step in knowing how to talk to your audience is to know yourself. And I mean this in a business context, of course. We're not going to get super philosophical. We've only got an hour. But we want to know is like, why are you in business? Or why are you writing? Or why are you doing what you're doing online, right? And what is your unique value proposition? In English, meaning what is the benefit of doing business with you specifically? How do you best solve the problem? How do you best get them the information that they're coming there for? Your website has a single primary verb. Now, we know that we can do a whole lot of different things on a website, right? We saw all of these verbs. You know, we'll go back to that so you can see them again. You know, there's probably websites where you can do more than one of these things. You can probably contact and join and download and buy and sign up and share all on the same website, right? But your website has a single primary verb. It has kind of one thing that you really want people to do or do well. And if not the whole website, at least each of your landing pages should have a single primary verb, right? And what we want to know is, how does this thing align with the solution to your audience's problem? There's a great metaphor about, you know, if you're trying to sell drills, you're not actually trying to sell drills. You're not here to talk about the features of the drill and how great the drill works. You're trying to sell how great you can make a hole in a wall, right? Because that's why they want a drill. You know, they want the hole in the wall. They don't care about the drill, but like the drill is a good way of getting them there. And if you've got a drill, let's convince them that the drill gets them a good hole in the wall. We're not talking about features or technology here, but we're talking about solutions. So then let's think about, you know, if your website has a single primary verb, you know, that's kind of your win, right? What is your primary win? What's the goal with your website? What do you want people to do? This could be overall. What's your goal for the entire website? What's the most successful thing someone could do? Each page, like I said, could have a different goal. So what are your primary wins per page? Maybe some pages are optimized more to get people to sign up for a newsletter, and other pages are more optimized to get people to buy a product or to buy a coaching solution or to contact you to find out more about your service. This is something, again, that goes with your secondary verbs. So maybe your primary, the best possible thing someone could do is buy something, but the second best thing they could do is sign up for your newsletter so they can get a discount next time, right? So we can start thinking about, what is your primary win? What are the verbs that people are supposed to be doing on your website? And then how do you optimize the pages for those things? And that's what we're going to be talking about for the rest of the presentation, is how do we design a website for conversions? And conversions means having people take the action that you want them to take, right? So There's a verb, they do the thing, and you're happy because it feels like a success. That's basically a conversion. The key takeaway here is that we want to reduce friction as much as possible. And you're going to hear friction come up over and over again as part of this conversation. But what we are trying to do is reduce friction as much as possible. When someone doesn't see what they need quickly, you know, that 8-second rule that we talked about before, or they have to jump through too many hoops in order to get there, you're going to lose conversions. Those things are friction. Those are the things that are getting in the way of the person doing what they came there to do, doing that verb, getting you that win. So how do we optimize for conversions? First of all, we want to be direct. We want to support the primary verb of each page by optimizing each page to do one thing well. If you have a page where you want people to buy something, and then you clutter it up with like, oh, but you can also sign up for here, and oh, but you can also contact me here, and oh, but also like there's another thing going on over here. Oh, also, what if you want to share this? Like, that's going to be very, very distracting, and it's going to make it harder for them to do the thing. So be direct and optimize each page to do one thing well. If you've been around the WordPress community at all, you may have heard the phrase decisions, not options. There's a concept called Hick's Law, which is basically saying that the time it takes for an individual to make a decision is directly proportionate to the possible choices he or she has. Too many options is going to make it take way too long to make a decision. We're going to, you know, again, that 8-second rule, the satisficing, the driving by on a billboard, much less likely to convert. So if you give people too many options, you actually have a lower conversion rate. Again, we want things to be direct, so we want to simplify and focus our content. Each page should be optimized to do one thing well. So we have our primary call to action, and our content should be focused around that. It should be driving people towards that. And also, we want to be trustworthy, right? We want to provide context and remove ambiguity. We want people to feel comfortable knowing where they are, knowing what happens next, knowing where they're going. So basically, what happens when they do something? So if I click on this button, if I do X, then Y happens. And I know that that's going to happen because that makes me very comfortable taking that next step, going ahead and converting, going ahead and purchasing that product. I know that if I buy it, you know, what's going to happen next? Is it okay? Do I have a chance to review my purchase? You know, that kind of stuff. One way that we can be trustworthy is to use really clear language. We don't want to be clever. We don't want to use too much industry jargon. We want to say what we mean and mean what we say. I just really like this sign, come in, we're awesome. I mean, there's nothing more clear than come in, we're awesome. You know what to do. There's your call to action, come in, and there's the language supporting it because we're awesome. Another principle is to be seamless, which means that you want to allow conversions from anywhere in the process. You don't know at what point the user of your site is going to decide, yeah, you know what, I would like to sign up. I would like to buy this product. And if they've decided and it's not really easy for them to click that button right there, then they're going to get frustrated and they're going to want to leave. I don't know if you've been on some of these landing pages that just scroll on and on forever with like a million, you know, testimonials and proof of concept and all of this stuff. And you're just like, okay, no, like you sold me in the first paragraph. I just want to buy it now. Like, this is fine. I don't need to read what these 12 people have to say about it. Like, I got it. I don't need to read the conversions. I got like the comparisons, the conversations. Like, no, like just let me buy your thing. I've gotten frustrated and left before. So, you know, allow conversions from anywhere in the process. And how do we do that? Well, if we've identified our primary call to action, if we've identified what we want people to do, put it everywhere, right? So like if you are an e-commerce site, you know, make sure that the cart is accessible everywhere, you know, in the header, easy to get to. If you want people to get in touch with you, make sure that contact button is everywhere. You know, if you have a sticky header, if you have a sidebar widget, or if you have them kind of stuck in the middle of the content, if you want people to come in and visit your store, you know, make sure that your hours and location are everywhere. A lot of people put them in the footer. A lot of people put stuff in the header. Like, make it really easy for people to figure out what to do. Here's a great example. So this is a website, right? Looks just like one. but you can't really tell what you're supposed to do. Now, I know that it's all lorem ipsum, but that doesn't really matter. You can usually, we're looking at it like a billboard, right? We're scanning it, and I don't really see what it is that I'm supposed to be doing on this website, right? So what we want to do is make it super obvious, right? So what have I changed between these two things? I have added calls to action everywhere. And it's really obvious. There's big buttons, and also they're redundant, they're repetitive, right? You can see this call to action. It must be the primary call to action because I have used it in 3 different places on the same page. And then I've got a couple secondary calls to action if that one's not your thing. But I've made it really obvious and really redundant. Another way to make your call to action really obvious is this concept called encapsulation. It's basically a fancy way of saying put it in a box. It doesn't have to be in a box, but what that means is that you want the area where your call to action is to be visually distinct from the rest of the content. So whether that's through color or shape or size or typography, in this example, it's literally in a box with a different color, with a different type treatment on it. But you can see how it's extremely easy to see where that call to action is. In the left example, if we're reading it like a billboard, if we're trying to find the thing the fastest, it's a little harder to see. It gets kind of blended into the background. You can even use directional cues. Directional cues are using things like image or design elements or white space in order to refocus on the message. Now here, you can see that the one on the left has some pretty good encapsulation, right? They're using color, they're using a box, they're using different treatments. But the one on the right, I mean, they're using arrows, which is the most direct way to do it. Look at this first, look at this second. That's a very, very obvious way of providing directional cues, but that's not the only way to provide directional cues. You can also use the way the white space is laid out, the way the things flow through the page, or you can use your imagery or other elements. This is actually a great example of 2 different principles. One is using directional cues. You can see that the woman in the image is looking at the call to action, which is providing you that direction of like, oh, this must be the next thing to look at. And also, you can see that it's using the rule of thirds, which is a photography and image composition principle where the most interesting parts of the image should be kind of in where those dots are, right? So you can see here, we are using both directional cues. You're following her eyes through the image to the text, to the call to action, and we're using the rule of thirds, so it's very, very visually pleasing. We also want to make sure that our buttons are well designed. Now, I remember when flat design first came out, and this was a little while ago, there was a problem because everything was flat, and therefore it was really hard to tell what was clickable. Now, before flat design, we had skeuomorphic design where everything was very, very, like it looked like something in the real world. We went through the shiny button phase where all the buttons were just glossy and just like looked like you wanted to press them. We've now moved into, material design, kind of introduced this dimensional paper design, and we've moved into the land of almost flat design, right? So we want our buttons to be clear that they're buttons. So you can use a little bit of dimensionality to make it clear, or a little bit of a different treatment to make it clear this is a thing that we should click on. And again, like I said earlier about using, clear language, we don't want to be clever here when we want people to convert. We want to say buy now. We don't want to say spend your monies, right? Like that's not the same thing. I mean, it is the same thing, but people aren't going to know what that means. Again, that's also not very trustworthy because I know what buy now means, but I don't know what the other one means. And I want to trust what I'm clicking on. So that's designing for the conversion itself. The other part of this is in collecting information. Now, usually as part of a conversion, you're going to have to collect people's information. Before I get into this, I want to introduce this concept called the zero interface. Now, the zero interface is basically the ideal interface. The ideal interface is no interface at all. The ideal, the most frictionless interface possible is I just think of something and it happens, right? So any interface that I'm interacting with, whether that's on my phone, whether that's in a book, whether that's, on a computer, whether that's face-to-face with a human or using a voice device, any interface is already a barrier because there's something between the thing I'm thinking of and the result that I want. We're not quite at the zero interface yet. Maybe I'm kind of glad about that. I'm not sure I want things reading my mind. But do remember that just the fact that we have an interface is already a barrier. So any additional steps that we introduce beyond this interface is another potential roadblock. And again, we're trying to reduce friction. Sometimes it feels when you're trying to design for, collecting information, that it's a battle between what you want as the website owner and what they want as the user of the website. Now, what you want, right? You want all the information possible about them, right? Like whatever, within whatever you're allowed to collect, right? We don't want to be illegal, but we want to know everything. We want to know like where they're from and like what their demographics are and why they're buying what they're doing. I mean, we want to know everything, right? Like we want all the analytics. What do they want to give you? Basically, they don't want to give you anything. They just want what they want, right? So there's this tug of war between you wanting all this information, them wanting to give you no information, and where do we meet in the middle to figure out like what's the minimum amount of information that we need to be able to have them convert successfully. So calls to action usually involve forms, and this book, Web Form Design, is one of the best books on the subject. I'm going to bring up a few principles of this, but I wanted to introduce you to the experience that we have when we come upon forms. And forms are involved in almost every kind of conversion, right? You know, if it's making a purchase, you have to fill out a form. If it's the contact form, you have to fill out a form. Signing up for a newsletter, pretty much everything that involves a conversion involves a form. And I don't know about you, but this is often how my experiences go, right? So we're going to get into some classic, oh no, a wild form appeared. And, so, usually when you have a form, it's a little bit annoying, right? There it is. So you used, please don't make me fill it out. Can I avoid doing this, right? That's the attack. Like, don't make me do this. I just want to do what I came here to do. I don't want to fill out this long form. This is annoying. It's not very effective. So if a form is very complex, if it gets in your way, if you don't want to fill it out, you think it's not worth filling out, oftentimes you're just going to run, right? So this is a little bit of classic humor for you. But from this book, the best way to speed up the process is to not ask the question at all, right? Because we're making people run. But some information is necessary, right? We can't send somebody something if we don't have their address. We can't, have someone pay for something if we don't have their payment information. So what do we do, right? It's important to remember that the more steps we introduce, the more friction we introduce. So we want to have as few steps as possible. We want to minimize this. So the solution here, again, remove friction, open the doors for people. Use design to make it clear what you have to offer and how people can access it. Basically, get out of your own way. So when we're talking about forms, we really want to only collect the bare minimum at one time. If you have to collect a lot of information, let people fill in more later if necessary. And if you can avoid a form or avoid a field, do so. Of these two forms, which one would you rather fill out, right? It probably depends. But I would certainly rather fill out the one on the right if that's really all they need from me. Like if I'm signing up for an email newsletter, do I really need to fill out that form on the left? I don't think so. The one on the right, even that one might be too much. Like, why do you need my phone number? At least only the name and email are required. Maybe the name's not even required. Maybe only email is required. That's important to think about. There have been some studies done about short forms versus long forms and how much it changes the conversion. So this specific study kind of showed 5 fields versus 9 fields. You can see the change in conversion in percentage. It's just real, just by adding fields to this very small form, it changed the conversion rate and therefore the cost per conversion. There was a very famous study of a button that was costing $300 million. So this is a really fun study, but basically what it was is it was they had to make a purchase and there was a mandatory account sign up prior to purchase. So after you added your products to the cart and before checkout, you had to either sign up for an account or sign in. So what happened, the people did that because they thought it would save them time, right? So they're like, oh, well, if people have an account, like they can just sign in and they don't have to re-enter all their stuff. It'll be great. What happened in real life is that people forgot that they had an account. So they got really frustrated. They'd try to sign in. They'd create like multiple accounts, or they'd abandon their carts, right? So this is a link to learn a little bit more about that. But that's a really interesting study that just having people interact with a form that they don't want to interact with, it costs $300 million in this case. We're doing a cost-benefit analysis right now. So basically, what people are willing to give you is proportional to what you're getting. So a free download, they're probably willing to give you a lot less information than if they're purchasing something, right? Like if they're purchasing something, they're probably wanting to give you, you know, their address, their payment info, but they probably don't want to give you that for a free download. That's usually very, very frustrating. They are probably willing to give you more information if they're filling out a support ticket, you know, like, oh yeah, sure, here's my site data, here's my URL, here's, you know, maybe an admin login for you, than a general contact form, right? Like I wouldn't give you any of that in a general contact form, but if you're doing support for me, I'll give you a lot of information. So the cost-benefit analysis of filling out this information. I want to talk a little bit too, when you're designing, about the power of search and filter. I also wanted to talk a little bit about navigation, but of course PowerPoint crashed and lost all of the changes I made for this lovely presentation. So I'll just speak to it while we're here. But the point here is that you don't know how your audience thinks. So if you want to get them to the place where they convert, if you want to help them find what they're looking for, we want to make that as easy as possible too. So we're not just removing friction on the conversion side, we're removing friction on the navigation, search, and filter side. There are two kinds of ways that people are looking at your site. I gave them a couple of labels. One is exploration versus definitive search. And it's like two different mindsets that your user will have. So first of all, we have exploration and organic discovery. So that's the person who's like, well, I'm here and I need to find a solution, but I don't know what it is yet. So these people will benefit from the ability to narrow down and focus from broader content, right? So what does that look like? First of all, taxonomies are a great example. So if you're a WordPress user, you're already familiar with the native WordPress taxonomies like categories and tags. So if you've done a lot of blog writing or whatever, you've interacted with this stuff. This is an example of a news blog that's using a bunch of taxonomies here. These are the topics. And you can see, you know, oh, application development has 27 articles. If I want to read that, I can just click on that. That's a really great way of helping to narrow down content. Another great way is filtering. So if you've ever used an e-commerce platform, that's a perfect example. So this is an example on Amazon of mixing bowls, right? I want to find mixing bowls, but I only want the ones that are eligible for Prime. I only want the ones that are dishwasher safe, and I only want the ones that are in these brands, right? So that'll help me find the bowl I want. Even if I don't know the exact bowl I want, I probably have some opinions, and I can narrow it down from the vast amount of mixing bowls that exist. Breadcrumbs are also great. Now, I had put together some newer versions of breadcrumbs, but you can see some slightly older versions of breadcrumbs. They may not exist like this, but basically you can see here where you came from. So here I am on this Starbucks refreshers page. It's in grocery, which is in coffee and tea, which is in energy drinks, right? So I've narrowed it down. This other one, I think this was the old MoMA website. But you can see how we're in living and we have gone into floor and wall. So this breadcrumb, and the breadcrumb itself actually turns into a navigation, which is super fun. Here, the old CNN navigation, health, diet, and fitness, we know where we are. So the point of breadcrumbs is to know where you came from. Again, that goes back to that trustworthiness, right? Context. So where did we come from? Where are we going? This helps you establish where we came from so that we feel very oriented and we understand where we're at in the site. Now, on the flip side, we have definitive search, which is like, I know exactly what I'm looking for. Like, I know the brand name, I know the model number, I know the article title. People that are coming to your site for definitive are benefiting most from search. And I think search is super powerful alongside autocomplete. So autocomplete here, meaning like you type in a search and it starts showing you stuff right away. So these are a couple examples. The one on the right is actually from Advanced Custom Fields. If you're using one of their autocomplete fields, you start typing and it'll show you some of the actual stuff that matches it. The one on the left is like a custom one that I worked on a while ago, where you can start typing and narrow it down. There were some great examples that I had pulled together. Target.com has a really cool autocomplete where if you start typing it, it will show you not only categories, but subcategories and where things are. And then you can start browsing from there. But a lot of different e-commerce sites have pretty good autocomplete because they know that they're a vast platform and they want to be able to narrow it down. So anyway, that's kind of the majority of the formal part of the presentation that I have. And I wanted to be able to leave plenty of room for questions. But first of all, before I get into that with everybody, this is me. This is how you find me on Twitter. This is how you email me. I do UX strategy and like front-end development, custom WordPress theme development. And I love to answer questions. Back when it was, a thing, I used to speak a lot at different WordCamps and meetups. Hopefully, again, I will be able to see some of you in person in the future. But I wanted to leave some time for questions, so that is that.